Welcome to the Spoiler Alert podcast, and we are back in the month of October with a Halloween marathon. Today, we will be reviewing Guillermo del Toro's The Devil's Backbone. This was made in 2001, and I had not seen it before doing this review. Had you seen it before this, Dakota?
Yeah, but I couldn't remember it very well, so I don't know if it's something I ever finished, or it's like, because I did a lot of that where it's like I'd watch like half an hour of something and be like, yeah, I saw that movie. But I saw Kronos, which is his first film, and then he did Mimic, and then I think this is his third. And the doctor in this film is the main actor from Kronos. I saw Criterion included Kronos, Devil's Backbone, and Pan's Labyrinth as a sort of trilogy. Although Kronos doesn't really have much to do with Devil's Backbone and Pan's Labyrinth are a lot more alike than than Kronos is kind of the odd one out. It's a vampire film, basically, but it's a really interesting take on the vampire genre. He does a lot of vampire stuff. Like he did a series for FX called The Strain. He wrote a novel series, and he did a few other things with vampires. But
yeah, so this being his third film, it makes a lot of sense that you mentioned that it's like the one that's most related to Pan's Labyrinth, because this also takes place during the Spanish Civil War between the nationalists and the rebels. And this movie has what Alfred Hitchcock calls a MacGuffin. Now, what a MacGuffin is it's something that seems central to the plot, but it doesn't necessarily end up mattering, but it's used to drive the plot forward.
I thought a MacGuffin was just like a literal plot device. Like we have to get the orb of blah 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 and get it to it does.
That's what I mean. Yep, it's just a plot. It's just a plot device. Like one of the famous ones,
like a literal plot device, though. Usually,
right.
Yeah.
So, like one of the famous ones is North by Northwest, when they're like looking for this like crushed uranium or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not really there or whatever it was. Like it ended up just totally not mattering. And that is kind of the case.
The Rug in the Big Lebowski.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, yeah. It's just kind of used as leverage for the story. The main MacGuffin in The Devil's Backbone is actually the bomb that you see if you're watching the videos on YouTube behind me.
Well, as far as the bomb goes, I mean it's definitely an ominous presence through the movie. It's a literal time bomb. You're waiting for this. It just sets everything. Is it like there's a general sense of unease because there's literally an unexploded fucking bomb in the middle of everything. It obviously constantly reminds you of the background war, though we never really see it, but it's a constant reminder of that's what's out there. It just creates a sense of dread through the film.
Yeah, it's a really good symbol throughout the film too. Yeah, so that's a really interesting one. The opening scenes of the movie are of the bomber dropping the bomb, and then that's kind of spliced in with us seeing a kid die or disappear, and then some other kids get like thrusted backward upon like the bomb's collision. Although the bomb did not explode, as we said, but it's got like a timer on it, and it's an ominous thing in the middle of the movie that sets things in motion.
It's sort of unrelated, but there's a very popular game, Fallout 3, that literally they build a settlement around an unexploded nuke, and the image is just like Devil's Backbone, so I'm almost positive that was the inspiration.
This is actually dead set in the middle of an orphanage in Spain during, again, the Spanish Civil War. Now, the overseers to this orphanage are an old doctor, who we will refer to as the doctor, and then a woman named Carmen who has a prosthetic leg. They have a weird relationship, and I guess just to even though it's out of place, dive into their relationship specifically.
I think it was like they had feelings for each other, but he never could bring himself to say it. But I mean, I think it is reciprocated on her part. Like she does have feelings for the doctor, but I don't know what the issue is. He's too soft or something. Maybe literally. I don't know. But I'm like, so.
And then there's this kid who's newer to the orphanage named Carlos. Carlos's like first day in the middle of the square, he sees a ghost, and that ghost would later be known to be Santi. And it's like a orphanage boy, like about his age. I got a little bit confused at times with the politics in this movie because they claimed to be nationalists and not leftists. But even though they're nationalists, they're worried about Franco.
Yeah, I think they're pretending to be the nationalists, but then holding on to gold for the rebels or whatever.
Franco ended up winning,
And then
but
I think that's when Pan's Labyrinth takes place, is like after the
yeah,
war.
yeah, because there's a little bit of politics in Pan's Labyrinth, but it's very small. It's basically just saying that the rebel fighters in Pan's Labyrinth were communist, and that we're on the left side, you know.
Well, since you're
Not
not
super
bombed,
important, but it is another ticking time bomb device by setting this during a war where, okay, someone's inevitably going to come here. Like, it's not just the bomb, it's also just Franco's army, you know.
right.
So that's part of it. And then Carlos has a run-in with this boy named Jaime, and Jaime is kind of like one of these asshole bully kids that ends up being like misunderstood type of thing.
Well, yeah, it gets way worse before it gets better though, because I thought he was going to ease up sooner, but he starts to go like full, like let the right one in. He's getting the knife out, and like he's going psycho, and who knows how events might have unfolded if he had, you know, if he'd gone his way. I don't know what his plan there was, but yeah, eventually it comes around, and there are much more sinister things than just the bully at play in the orphanage. But he's a pretty hardcore bully to start with, so yeah.
And then this is around the time when we are introduced to Jacinto, and Jacinto is like somewhere in between a caretaker and like the most experienced orphanage boy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing he's like maybe, I don't know, maybe even 10 years like since he was kind of a kid, because she was saying, Carmen was saying that she's been getting groovy with him since he's 17, which is kind of fucked up, but it's hard to guess his age, but definitely older than anyone else there as far as the boys.
And then Carlos sees some spooky shit, like some shadows and like footprints of like wet footprints and this and that. They end up catching Jacinto trying to infiltrate a safe. And in this safe, we learn is a bunch of Franco's fucking gold. He had a key that he knew of. And the way he gets a hold of that key comes into play later. Carlos hears a voice at night, and it sounds like, and this is Santi. We've already brought him up, the ghost Santi. It ends up leading him into a chamber where it's basically a brewery or a distillery for what we learned to be the devil's backbone, which is a alcohol that
The fetus is in formaldehyde, basically.
Yes, it's there's no formaldehyde.
Maybe it's alcohol. Rum, right? Rum, right? I'm drinking rum, so that it was
yeah. And this ghost warns the boys, because there's like a small group of the boys now. I think there's Jaime and then one of the dorkier looking ones. The ghost warned them that you are all going to die. Carlos ends up getting caught for having gone out hunting and scavenging through this like building in the orphanage. Carlos was dared by Jaime to do it, but then I think he made Jaime go with him. And then Jaime got out in time and Carlos did not. The dude was like trying to shoot at him damn near, like Jacinto was.
Right. Yeah, he comes charging at him, and I think that's the first sign that you get that Jacinto was pretty aggressive, because the way he's just like walking at the kid, like, oh shit, he's gonna fuck him up, you know, like.
And then the doctor figures out who the other boys that did it were.
Yeah.
But Carlos takes the whole blame though. When Carlos is in basically the principal's office meeting with the doctor, that's when he explains what we were just talking about, which is the jars of rum that have fetuses in them. And these fetuses were born prematurely and had this defect where the skin was not covering the spine. So they call this drink the devil's backbone, and it's supposed to get men hard.
And then he sells the concoction to people in town. And
yeah, and I don't think he ever explains to people how it's made, which is creepy.
I think they know that. I think because he says like people will try anything, like they believe it. So I don't know if that it's like stem cell juice or something. I don't fucking know. But like, yeah, he seems to say that its healing property or its erection giving properties are, ridiculous. But then he himself is, sipping the juice. We see, so because I think he wants to please Carmen someday.
Like it's not a super like jump scary movie, or it doesn't like it has like its scares, but it doesn't, and it's like definitely a horror movie. Like you think of it as a horror movie, but like it's not gruesome or anything like that, which doesn't necessarily make it better for that reason, but it is just unique for that reason.
Yeah, it's again like Dark Water feels similar in that way, like because that's going to be one of my recommendations, where it's like it's more about the sort of family drama, or of this single mother trying to raise her daughter, and then there are supernatural elements in the background that come into the foreground towards the end of the film, and it's a lot like that. It's more about the dread, just sort of the dreadful situation of the war that they're in throughout, the film, and the ghost is just kind of a backdrop to that kind of the very real tragedy of war and all that.
The next scene we see Jacinto and Carmen fucking. He goes over to the dresser and we see him take another key out of a key ring. So every day they're fucking, he goes and steals a key and tries to break into the safe to get the gold. So that happens every time.
Yeah, I don't know. There's some weird fetish stuff with the wooden leg. She says, I don't know if there's a metaphor about hardwood. I'm thinking it's there. She needs, I don't know, some hardwood, but she likes the doctor's poetry. She likes to listen to him recited in the next room. But I don't know. There's some kind of contrast between the two where I'm not sure what the movie's trying to get at with it, to be honest, but it's kind of just a fucked up situation where she listens to his poetry recitals through the wall and he listens to her getting it on through the wall. Except she pretends that he can't hear her, which it's like, you're right in the next room. I don't know, just a weird dynamic they have. So,
and then Jaime has a dream about Santi because they used to know Santi. Santi had died the day that the bomb dropped. And then a bunch of leftists are captured and executed, including one of the doctor's friends. There is a scene like that where there's like a struggle for a knife.
So Carlos saves Jaime. He pulls the knife out. He's about to fuck him up. And then Carlos hits him in the head. He falls into the cistern or whatever. And they're like, he can't swim. So they have to dive in after him and pulls him out. You imagine that Sancti was killed because he has this forehead gash that's bleeding into the air all the time, like which is a really great effect. It's really creepy. Like just this ribbon of blood at all times. So you're thinking maybe Jaime, killed this kid, but then Jacinto comes down and he's like, whose knife is this? And Carlos takes the blame, and which I don't fucking know why. Well, anyway, and then Jacinto slashes him on the face, and then I think,
he wanted to gain some allies.
Well, yeah, but your ally just tried to fucking stab you or some shit. Like, this kid has serious issues. Like, I think because he's so fucked up by what we know we saw at the end of the film, but that could have taken a real turn. But Jacinto slashes his face. I think that's when you start to be like, okay, wait, yeah, maybe like.
So now at this point in this story, Jacinto kind of starts to go crazy. He tries to get the gold again, but is caught by the doctor and Carmen. And the doctor has, I think, a shotgun pointed at him at this point. But he meets up with some buddies. And while he's doing that, they start to prepare to leave as well. because everyone's like basically fuck this orphanage at this point.
Well, I think the doctor's also really worried that the army, like they're coming in and they're gonna kill them. So because he saw those executions.
Yeah, so there's like multiple ticking time bombs. There's the Jacinto one, there's the bomb, there's the army as a whole closing in, there's Santi's storyline.
Right.
Ticking time bombs all over the place. This is when Jacinto really kind of goes crazy, and with the help of two like drinking buddies of his, they plan an explosion to kill as many people as they can. And it's using gasoline, and it's also obviously to blow out the safe. That scene is fucking crazy because that's surprisingly a big scene. A lot of people fucking die. And there's
that was shocking. Well, but that is what Santi promised, and so I don't know why he's caught off guard. Like, I'm like, wow, they just killed most of the kids, like in one fell swoop. A lot of people die.
Important side characters, like there was like a cook that died and stuff like that. Basically, any other adult or child except for like 6 total people, I think.
Right. Well, Carmen ultimately passes. The doctor is around a little longer, but it seems his wounds are fatal. He has, which is something I like, because you get like blast damage, and like movies don't normally show that. I'm pretty sure that's what killed the doctor, right? Like his ears are hemorrhaging, and he does. I mean, I'm kind of spoiling it past a little while later, but yeah, like in these fucking movies, like people are like literally engulfed by flame. They're in such close proximity to the explosion. They're just like walking it off. It's like, no, there's a physical impact that like ruptures shit, and collapses lungs. And so he ultimately the doctor dies as well.
Like this whole scene is one of the major turning points in the film. It kind of turns the page from the second act to the third act. Yeah. So. And Jacinto's attempt at the safe, I think it opened up, but they didn't find the gold they were looking for. But he stumbled across the prosthetic leg that Carmen had, and he looked at it for a second. It looked kind of strange, and then he kicked it open, and he kicked open a little door in the side of it.
It was hollowed out and had
gold. It was a hollowed out leg, and she had like a fuck ton of gold in there. And then that's when like he kind of gets the upper hand, and
like after basically all the adult caretakers are dead, Jacinto and his buddies lock up the kids in a room. Their attempts at getting the gold is unsuccessful. They leave him right as he actually discovers the gold in the hollowed out leg, like we said. But all the while, the kids have been locked in a room. They know that like they can't just wait it out. He's either just going to leave them to die in that room, or he'll burn the whole place down or something. So they break out, they start fashioning spears and shit. It gets very Lord of the Flies, like they're literally carving down sticks and shit. And now it's just Jacinto and the kids alone in the orphanage. And he himself, obviously, an orphan. It's kind of a showdown with like a reflection of himself, but
before Jacinto came back one last time to basically to blow everybody up and stuff with his friends, he had his fiance with him. His fiance pretty much told him off because he's acting fucking crazy. He kind of gave her the ultimatum of you're with me or against me. So when she was against him, he killed her.
Yeah.
And then
she didn't really have a choice, because she had to get to town to get help, or else, but he's saying, no, get in the car. So, if she wants to help the kid, she has to say fuck off. And by saying fuck off, well, that's it, So it wasn't just like an act of defiance. It was, but it was like, there was really no other way. It was either abandon the kids or, he's probably going to kill you. And he did. So it was kind of a sad scene.
At this point, Jaime vows to kill Jacinto because Jacinto returns the cigar wrapper as a wedding ring to propose to Jacinto's fiance. And it was kind of like this cute, like, oh, look at the little kid. Look at him, like that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, but Jacinto's a prick because he brings it back to the kid and he's like, here you go. Yeah, So, but it's not just that. There's a history of him being very afraid of Jacinto, and we learn why.
And then in this next scene, they have the doctor is very much wounded, barely alive, has like this chair set up by the front door or front window, and has a shotgun and is just waiting for Jacinto to come back. You know, he kind of just stands his ground, and Jacinto backs off for now. And then he just continued to guard the place until he passed away.
Yeah, it was interesting too, because the doctor initially was kind of, he's like, he didn't say it like that, but he's kind of like, I don't really give a fuck about the kids, Carmen. I just want to get you out of here safely. And then once Carmen is dead, and that was her whole life, was protecting these children, that becomes his cause. And he's like, I won't, I won't abandon you. He kind of doesn't quite live up to that, because he does die, but he dies literally guarding them. He's like almost a scarecrow with a shotgun in hand. His final moments were spent protecting the children. It's kind of an interesting redemption, right? Because there was so much that was unreciprocated and unsaid with Carmen, but by taking up, I think for the first time, her cause, which was really taking care of the children at the end, he probably felt a bit more connected to her,
Yeah. And then after they lose the protection of the doctor, they hide in these closets, and like you had mentioned before, they begin to like whittle spears out of mops. And then
there was something that was really confusing though. Like so this is before Jacinto's buddies take off. They're sitting around a fire and they're like, we're taking off in the morning whether we find the gold or not. And I'm like, they're drunk. It's like, why don't you just wait for them to go to sleep and then spear the shit out of them? But the kids don't do that, even though they're like right around the corner listening to the plan to burn this whole place down with them inside of it. I'm like, just wait for them to pass out drunk, stab them, but they don't. So that's a little bit of but then they are also kids that probably aren't terribly eager to kill people unless they have to. So,
Jaime explains how Santi died to Carlos, because when the bomb fell, or around the time when the bomb fell, same night, Santi had seen Jacinto try to break into the safe, and then out of rage and just instinct, Jacinto shoves Santi against a wall, and he hit the wall pretty much squarely like on his right temple, and there's just a hole in his skull, and he's dead. And Jacinto didn't know that that's what was going to happen, but like you also don't feel bad for him.
At first, he's almost like a kid, right? Where it's like, you're not hurt that bad. It's not. It's like he's panicking, like he fucked up. Like don't tell your mom. And then he realizes he really fucked up, and he does. There's the cistern there, and he sees what he's got to do. All the while, Jaime is looking on at this, and Jacinto doesn't know he's there. He's hiding in the shadows, I think, or behind some column in the room. So yeah.
And he dragged Santi's body into the Devil's Backbone.
The one thing that didn't make sense is he ties him up, and I'm like, you could have he slipped and fell and cracked his head. Like, I mean, you could have made it look like that, because people might notice a decomposing body in the pool, but I don't know. And then he insists that none of the kids go down there, and like nobody's. I mean, I know the water's super murky. It just seemed like a little bit of a plot hole to me. I'm like, that was gift wrapped, head wound in the pool, not like strangulation marks or something, like, well, I just sound like a serial killer, but I'm like, that was like gift wrapped to you, dude. You didn't have to tie him up. Like, then people are going to know it wasn't a natural thing. So I don't know.
And then they kind of meet this collision point where Jacinto is baited by Carlos and Jaime to run through basically the chambers into the distillery, or whatever you want to call it, for where they make the Devil's Backbone. They end up like sneak attack, like psych bitch, like stabs him in the throat.
And they really fuck him up too. Like I'm sure that's an artery. He's going.
Yeah, like he's bleeding out no matter what.
I mean,
they end up rolling him into the pool of the Devil's Backbone, and that's where Santi drags him down. to his death.
The kids venture towards town, which is war torn, but so it's still a pretty bleak note. They got to walk for a day with broken ankles and whatever. But yeah, it's a pretty bleak movie, a pretty bleak ending. But
Yep,
and
but
yeah,
that is the ending. In terms of cultural impact, it's a very similar film to, in terms of like style, to Pan's Labyrinth, more so than other Guillermo del Toro movies. I've also noticed in terms of style for this movie that this is very expressionistic. So what that would mean is like German expressionism was like old silent movies where the sets would look like the mood of the character. And that's kind of what like Tim Burton does. Because Guillermo del Toro to me is like a grounded Tim Burton and more talented Tim Burton.
I like Tim Burton, but yeah, no, I mean, I get what you're saying though. But they're both very visual. Like Del Toro's super
Yes.
visual. I
Yep,
mean,
they both use expressionism a lot, where the
I
sets and the mood of the sets is going to reflect the mood of the characters. So if people are sad, it's going to be rainy. If people feel, dark and twisted, there will be like an odd geometry to the land or an odd
and in this
geometry
movie,
to
there's a literal
that.
bomb in the courtyard, so that really reflects how everybody's feeling. It's fucking bleak. I mean, you can see it's rust and dust.
And then
bleak.
I would say the expressionism is even more so in Pan's Labyrinth, when you actually have like magical beings and like magical like trees, almost stuff like that surrounding you. That's a little bit of it too. But like also when you see, Edward Scissorhands and how like, the attic or whatever is like off kilter, or that's kind of like what expressionism is. And I think Guillermo del Toro is one of the people that kind of do that really well nowadays. Yeah,
I've seen it. I wish I could pull examples. I mean, because I do like that, like where where there's a visual, where the visual feeds into the character.
So in terms of recommendations, Dakota, what kind of movies would you recommend for someone who liked The Devil's Backbone?
Actually, well, yeah. So I said Dark Water like 50 times, and then I think I actually brought up Let Me In. I forget the director's name. The American remake's really not that bad. I mean, I know some people think it's awful, but I really like the guy who just did the Batman, right? Something Reeves, Matt Reeves. Didn't he do
he's
like
good.
one of the Cloverfield?
He did what? Yeah, he did at least one of the Planet of the Apes movies. I think he may have done.
Yeah, I think it's the first one, right? Wasn't it? I
think so.
Which is pretty good. So yeah, that'd be pretty much it. I mean, it's a solid ghost story. It's in J horror, the main, and we hadn't gotten The Ring until the next year in 2002. So a big thing in J horror is like the ghost feeding on sort of the angst of the household or the family dynamics, and sometimes it blows up beyond that. Like most recently, Jew on Origins. It's not just the nation. It's like literally feeding off of like the turmoil of the world. I don't know if that's something really exclusive to J horror. I'm trying to think of earlier examples. I mean, there have been great ghost stories, Turn of the Screw, and quite a few. But I think horror in general kind of like feeds on tragedy, right? I mean, like one of my favorite films, Dead Calm. Their child dies at the beginning of that. The Descent, again, one of my favorite films. Again, a child dies at the beginning, and like so, it just seems to be that the idea of horror is to be as unpleasant as humanly possible, from the very get-go. And obviously a child dying kind of, is the launching pad for a lot of that. So yeah, I don't know if J horror invented it, but I know Hereditary, which is, I don't know why I have a vendetta against the movie. It's really not a bad movie. It's just that people talk about it like it's the greatest fucking, it goes to 11. And like, for me, it's like, if you go to 11, then the quality should be 11. Like anybody can cut the heads off of children. I do it all the time. And I'll say, but like that movie is like the content is super graphic, and I'm like, well, I feel like the quality should match it. like to me, it looks like it's borrowing from Pulse, like the shadow, the figures coming out of the shadows, and just the family unit disintegrating. I mean, it borrows from a lot of things like Don't Look Now. Again, actually, yeah, a child dies at the very beginning of Don't Look Now. So horror and tragedy really go together is kind of what I'm saying. I'm not sure what the origin point of that is, but Devil's Backbone definitely feeds into it. There's an entire war, and the supernatural element is sort of like feeding off of it through the film. All right.
So I'd recommend I'd recommend Pan's Labyrinth. We talked about it a number of times. That's probably his Del Toro's next most similar movie.
Yeah.
I would recommend maybe something like, From Dusk Till Dawn. Like if you like kind of like the North American Southwest, whether it's, well, I mean, this is like Spain, but it's similar climates like the North American Southwest. It's a similar kind of genre, kind of fits into the Western genre, even though it's like a World War II era film.
I mean, if you wanted to do Spanish language horror, REC, like which is short for record, great film series, really terrifying. Found footage, but really, really good. Because some people might shrink away at found footage, but it's really, those are good movies.
Even like From Dusk Till Dawn, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Out of 5 stars, I think of this movie, I think solid. I don't think it launched into like a very, very strong movie for me. It teeters on either the higher end of 4 stars or the lower end of 4.5. I'm gonna go with the lower end of 4.5. I give this one 4.5 stars.
Yeah, again, I no, I totally agree. I'd say it's like a higher 4 for me. It's like a prototype for Pan's Labyrinth, where I really think it landed a lot better. Not to say that this is poor at all. It's a really solid movie, like you said. So
yeah, I agree. I think it's just very strong, but like it didn't fuck with my mind or like just fuck up my world like Pan's Labyrinth did.
Right. That movie's, yeah.
On that note, guys, so you said a higher end 4. I said a lower end 4.5. It is one of the better horror movies of that era. I think it's like an essential view for a Guillermo del Toro fan. This is one I was wanting to get around to. Glad we did it. Glad we reviewed it, and happy to kick off the Halloween marathon. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, of course, YouTube, Spotify, and wherever podcasts can be found. And then definitely take a look at that Patreon. You know what I mean? Like just take a look at it, guys. Just take a look at it. Like
you should put titties on the Patreon page. Maybe that would make it more enticing. Like, I mean, like we can't promise you'll get titties, but they're on the page. And if you go over there, you get to look at them at least.
Does the Spoiler Alert podcast need an OnlyFans?
Oh yeah, shit. We should. There we go. Yeah, we should be the first to do it. Just
like also upload our videos to OnlyFans.
Yeah, no, yeah. No,
so we'll be like, you can find us on Spotify, YouTube, wherever podcasts can be found, including OnlyFans.
I just diversify entirely. Pornhub, YouPorn, whatever, all of them. Just like, yeah. All right.
On that note, thank you for watching today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day, everybody.